Monty, it's us again. Do you remember us?
I never remember anybody.
No, so I gathered. We just wanted to see if we could find some of Tom's shoes, if that's alright.
Of course, do come in.
Thank you, Monty.
You're welcome.
How are you today?
Well, I think. Just about.
My friend Tom was staying with his elderly father, Monty, when he died.
I don't think so. Where else did he stay? That's the question. Which other people did he actually stay with?
We're just trying to find Tom's shoes, Monty, because he's going to wear a suit.
You're dressing the corpse, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
I don't know, I haven't died yet, so I can't comment on the situation.
Just to be on here, I suppose.
Can I have you a cup of tea or coffee?
Thank you so much. I don't think we have time.
Okay.
Up, luck.
Really? Well, that is a relief.
Well, that'll save us a few hundred bob. Monty, we need to go, but we found what we were looking for.
I see.
Thank you.
Well, that's good.
And we'll see you on Wednesday.
Yes, God willing, if we're all still alive.
Tom had just shown up in my life again after an absence of nearly 10 years. I hardly recognised him. He said his life had been a catalogue of disasters, and he is now giving himself one last chance to put things right. He was reinventing himself as a hedge fund salesman, and the plan was for me to film it.
And your name is?
Tommy.
But a month later, this happened.
Tom had a medley of genes: Russian, Lithuanian, Irish and English. Perhaps they played a part in his wide international interests. As a child, he wanted to know about simply everything.
Maybe I should have known from our earlier life together that Tom would have saved his biggest surprises until after he died. I met Tom when I was 16. He lived round the corner and hung out with my friends' older brothers and their mates. They all smoked weed, listened to reggae and spoke like Jamaicans. And then there was Tom, a skinny blonde geek who spoke like he was on University Challenge. He was the cleverest person I'd ever met. When I went up to his room for the first time, it turned out he was supplying the weed and the tunes for the whole neighbourhood. He decided to be black and outblacked his black friends. We loved each other from the start, and even though the teen dating didn't last long, we became companions for life's journey.
Good morning.
Hello, Tom.
Hello,
How are
Claude.
you?
Well, it's not that warm, so can you come in, please?
This was Tom's first day of his new job. Are you fit these days, Tom?
Well, I haven't been to the gym for 3 weeks because I can't afford my gym membership. But before then, I was fit.
Well, there's always Hampstead Heath to go running. I'd always felt that he needed to hit rock bottom before he could turn his life around. And now, 42 years old, destitute and living with his father, maybe this was his big chance. At least you have a bed and a...
Yes, that's true.
Where's your papa?
My papa was in bed asleep, I should think.
He told me that since his crisis began, he'd only been sleeping 3 hours a night.
Every night is a new nightmare. So, there isn't really an average. It can be anything from nothing to 8 hours. It's certainly true that since my life collapsed, almost every dream is a nightmare of some kind. And there's an awful lot of dreaming. Because also, Also, I go to bed 99 times out of 100 completely sober. And I have noticed that sobriety does lead to sort of heightened perception of whatever may be breaking one at the time.
He told me that he was in such a financial mess that if he didn't manage to sort it out this time, he was going to kill himself.
So what was last night's nightmare?
The nightmares of recently, I don't actually remember the details, but they've recently gone back to being very similar to the dreams I had in childhood. Which is good, because I think that, you know, in the last weeks before death, one is supposed to relive one's childhood. And as we know, these could well be the last weeks before my death.
It was typical of Tom to talk so glibly about dying. He'd always been reckless with his life and spoke as if it had little value.
42 years old, 10 years of crackhead and junkie, still only one filling.
They're a bit black.
Yes, of course. The rolling up of the butts into a cigarette. The fact that I'm actually so poor that I can't afford cigarettes. This is a very lovely automobile, isn't it?
I wanted Tom to explain how he planned to sell his new boss's hedge fund when the world's financial system was collapsing around us.
He's basically been trying to sell it to funds of hedge funds, hedge fund allocators, etc., i.e. Totally professional, totally technically orientated money managers.
But he took my question as an opportunity to flog his new product to me, Flocky.
The point is that the minimum investment in the fund is actually $50,000. This does not preclude the ordinary rich man in the street, or even for that matter, it wouldn't prevent the ordinary flocky. I would strongly recommend that the ordinary flocky could get over her moral headaches about hedge funds, put some money in, because
Okay, so
having made a bum recommendation to you, it would be nice if I could make a good one. But anyway,
it's once bitten, but let's see.
of course.
The bum recommendation was his suggestion last summer that I put the £250,000 from selling my house into the Icelandic bank, IceSave, the new no-branch internet bank that had Britain's investors clamouring for its 2% higher interest rate. Everyone, Tom said, was investing in it. For this brilliant advice, he borrowed £5,000 from me, which I was beginning to doubt I'd ever see again.
At the moment, I really can't afford to spend £5.80 on The Economist and Financial Times. The proper professional, subtle shoplifter, even you with me, didn't have any idea that I'd simply grabbed the paper, put it in my hands, put it under my arms and walked away. Of course, one day I will get caught and go to prison.
The previous month, on the 7th of October 2008, IceSave went bankrupt. I lost everything until the Chancellor, Alistair Darling, decided to pay back depositors with British taxpayers' money.
Would you think it's a sensible place to start if for the UK I go through all the members of the London Stock Exchange?
But I've never followed or understood the markets. I just trusted Tom because he was my friend and he was the man that had read The Economist since he was 13 years old.
And how soon do we actually have to know to decide when?
Where it says music, it was like sort of piano or organ music rather than hymns. So anywhere where it says music, with the choir, were £1,952. Without the choir, it's minus £1,056.
We're meeting to raise money for Tom's funeral because even though he died penniless, his mum wants a lavish send-off at St Bride's, the beautiful printers' church in Fleet Street, which has its own professional choir.
If we can afford the choir, it'd be nice to have the choir.
So how much is the choir?
The choir's about £1,000.
Let's go with the choir. If it's going to make the room better, let's go with it. We're not going to bury him twice, for God's sake. I think we're going to raise the full amount, is my feeling.
Yeah, in time.
Bobby met Tom on the rave scene in the 80s. He later became a client broker for Merrill Lynch and then Bear Stearns, just before they went bust a few months ago.
Look, we'll probably have a shortfall, but it's up to us guys to bridge.
Yeah, we'll bridge it and it'll come in.
And this is Nick, the hedge fund manager who had given Tom his last chance and was his boss when he died.
Dad, can I just tell you what I want to do, and this is between all of us. I want to circumvent the estate, and I want to take the money, but to proportionally give out to people Tom owed the money.
Really something we want to do there?
In terms
Of legality.
Talk of circumventing estates. I mean, seriously.
What's becoming clear is that before he died, Tom had borrowed money from all of us, not just me, and now many of us are in debt as a result.
But corporate debtors will have lien over individual debtors. Yeah, they do.
Who are corporate debtors?
If he has a bank account, if he owed...
He was in credit.
Was he?
With who?
With his bank.
Tom wouldn't have more than a £2,000 overdraft.
I don't think he'd be allowed an overdraft.
No, he owes shed.
No, I know who he owes a lot of money to a lot of people. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Not only were we his personal bank, but his friends were bankrolling his business. Something he'd neglected to mention to me in the weeks before his death. I do remember him being blacklisted in the early 80s after failing to pay back a 30 grand loan for his first business venture. That was the time when deregulation was at its peak and banks were handing out cash like sweets, and 20-year-old Tom was their perfect customer with his quick tongue and sharp ideas. Throughout his 20s, he was constantly reinventing himself with new business enterprises, and wherever he went, I followed. When he tired of running the trying to be black warehouse parties of South London, we moved to Trustafari in Notting Hill, where the sons and daughters of the rich and famous wined and dined us, and commissioned him to do up their newly purchased properties. And when he tired of property, we moved into a warehouse in Hackney, and he became one of the key players in the newly emerging art scene. He set up a design business in the heart of Shoreditch and printed all the catalogues of the young British artists before they'd made their millions and anyone had ever heard of them. Gavin Turk was one of them.
I met Tom through Joshua Compton, and Joshua had been producing all these incredible bits of paper that related to his manifestos and his shows, his exhibitions, his private view cards, and they all had this amazing old-fashioned quality. And I was told of this kind of mythic printer who was able to do all this stuff, and I ended up having a kind of a sort of a meeting with the great printer, and it was quite strange because it wasn't the person I expected. I think I expected someone much older. At that point, he already had started to teach himself and had learnt all about contemporary art and knew all about it.
And when the art parties and private views got boring, we'd retire to the private members' clubs of Soho, where he'd stay up all night taking cocaine with bankers and art dealers, and I'd go along for the ride.
Tom was quite mysterious, I think. I kept seeing lots of different kinds of different people that I thought were Tom. Every time I thought I knew who he was, he became someone else.
But just as the YBAs took off, Tom had already embarked on another life, reinventing himself as a businessman. In one of his clubs, he met a man who talked him into setting up a business that would make them millions, with the invention of a new electric motor. That was in 1997, and it was then that we started drifting apart.
Tom, rewind a tiny bit. So this is the name of your company that's doing the motor, right?
Yes, this is it, which is called Mechanical Interpol Technologies, or MIT.
And a very potted version
Of what?
of that business, and then where you are with doing other things.
Well, that
is that business literally on its last legs?
No, it's in a state where it's run out of money. It hasn't actually gone bust, and it's unlikely to. But I have spent about 18 months trying to build a machine which has actually defeated me. I can show you the machine if you want.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
You want to see it? I can't plug it in because I need it hard. This is approximately just over 6 years since I first came up with the idea.
Okay, I need an iconic photograph of you holding it.
But at the time, I wasn't hugely interested in this old bit of rusty metal. There had been so many crazy genius ideas that I'd never been able to keep up.
Is that okay?
And so it was only after his death that I started to uncover what had actually happened. Tom had gone into business with a man called Tony, who'd made a splash in the 80s, organising illegal rave parties.
Well, there's no doubt music certainly got everybody's feet tapping in the studio there. Tony Colston Hayter, the wealthy son of a university lecturer and described by his father as a genius.
I couldn't find Tony, and so I googled him and found this clip of him in his 20s.
The rumours in the press today you made something like £132,000, is that true? Did you?
I wish I did personally, but no.
What did you make out of it?
Me personally, I got a management fee for helping on the night.
Tom and Tony's big business idea was to develop and build a new kind of motor that would change the world. Tom's job was to raise the money, and so he began to recruit shareholders for this revolutionary idea, among them friends and family.
I believed in the whole thing passionately at the beginning, and I dined out on this extraordinary thing which would revolutionise industry.
Military machines, just, big tank. I mean, it's endless, really.
The electric motor hadn't been kind of looked at properly for 100 years.
Measureless wealth produced by this thing did rather turn my head at the beginning.
Because you just don't know, you just stand to make a nice sum of money.
We all bought shares. I don't know if you did. I bought, constantly buying new blocks of shares.
Tom's friends had risked hundreds of thousands of pounds on this latest business idea in the hope that they might make their fortune.
And I just sold a Picasso to some American clients and got a big commission for it, so I was the right person at the right time. And he was very strategic, of course, about that.
He borrowed it in small stages. It wasn't in one go. The receipts are all there. The bank receipts are all there.
I don't really want to go into that.
But quite a substantial amount.
Yeah, definitely a substantial amount.
They're getting investors, so much money. I mean, so much money.
But now they're all saying that it was Tom's partner, Tony, who was a bit dodgy and had run off with all the shareholders' money.
He was going around and getting money and not doing anything about the motor. So he's taking all the investors' money and just living off it.
Tony used the firm to finance his lifestyle.
So where has this all left you, Sherry?
It's left me trying to sell everything that I can.
And then I got a message from Tony agreeing to talk on the strict instruction that I couldn't reveal where he was hiding.
I'm a good salesman and I had a good product to sell. So people invested, those investors have been in for a long time and they're still in now, and some of them, put a terrific amount of money in. I think we paid ourselves sort of £5,000 a month, but it was so sporadic. We'd have like 6 months when it would all be paid, and then 6 or 8 months when we no one would have anything, we'd all borrow money, and then we're big. I'd raise another 250,000 from someone, and the first 60 of it would go to pay the salaries or something. So I wasn't running a company in any in a proper way at all. I mean, that's not how you run a company. But we always believed we were going to sell a license so soon, and we'd have millions, and it wouldn't, everyone would be happy. But obviously, we never quite got to that point.
When you invest money in things, there's various sort of paper trails, and I mean, how did that side of things work? How did the sort of business?
Well,
side work?
they took it all to Hong Kong for a start.
So they all left for Hong Kong.
What took them to Hong Kong?
I think what took him to Hong Kong was A, this motor, because they were all moving out there, and B, to escape some of the problems he was having in London.
It's drugs.
Yeah, primarily.
Tony and Tom moved their business to Hong Kong, setting up a cutting-edge workshop overlooking the South China Sea. At the same time, the world's leading engineers at Hong Kong and Sheffield universities had agreed to take on and test their inventions. They were convinced they were on the brink of a major breakthrough.
The whole feeling of the group of us was, Jesus, we really can get things done, things that other people can't do or wouldn't expect to even attempt. And as a team, we were really invincible in those kind of areas. And you know, even inventing a motor that Faraday and, you know, Tesla and no one had ever invented before, and always said it was impossible to do. And really, because Tom and I didn't have PhDs in this, we didn't believe all the books that said it couldn't be done. Tom was just so quick at learning things. Without him, I couldn't have raised hardly any of the money, because I'd go equipped with every answer to every question about the market and projected cash flows and everything else. I mean, he was absolutely amazing. We were like brothers, I suppose. I mean, we had wonderful times together. You know, we had electric scooters, so we'd be zooming around Hong Kong on our electric scooters.
And while Tom and Tony were living it up in Hong Kong, Tom found the place to spend all his newfound wealth, along with all the other businessmen. He quickly replaced his drug addiction for another.
Well, we all said, if he goes and spends all his salary in Thailand every few weeks, that's better than him having a relapse on drugs, you know, which ultimately Thailand's not going to kill him with an overdose or something. And he made him happy, you know. I mean, obviously he met all kinds of questionable ladies over there that told him all kinds of stories, but ultimately he did, you know, that's what Thailand is, and he did find some, eventually sort out which ones were genuine and lovely girls.
Who's that? Who's that? That's a girl. Believe it or not, that's her wife, even.
This is your wife?
Mm-hmm.
God, she looks really, really beautiful.
Yes, I mean, she is on the outside. I'm not necessarily sure. Oh, damn it. That's nice. That had better not be my wife asking me for more money, because I can't help her.
How much do you have to send her?
Oh, lots and lots.
It was in one of the go-go bars in Bangkok that he met Fern, who he later married. She was his second Thai wife, and I'm now beginning to think that this is where the $5,000 that I've lent him has gone.
I haven't got the money to go over there at the moment, nor really the time. And you can imagine she's not delighted.
So how's she surviving? What's she doing?
How do you mean she survives? Because I send her money.
How do you send her the money?
By Western Union.
So why is her living expenses as expensive as yours, given that she lives in Thailand? I don't understand that.
Because she's not just got to pay for herself, she's got to pay for about 6 other people as well, who are basically her ne'er-do-well brothers.
So you're supporting...
I'm supporting her entire family, because her dad died and her mum is very ill and can't walk.
How can you be so sure that you love her?
Well, how can anybody be so sure that they love somebody? I mean, you know, you see, these are kind of stupid questions, because everybody seems to think that they're entitled to get the, you know, total jackpot in the love lottery, and this is complete bollocks. You know, if you can find somebody that you can stand to spend long periods of time with without saying a word, then I think you're doing very well. You know, that's kind of the yardstick that I would fundamentally use.
Finding a wife to love had always been on Tom's list, and he'd often asked me and others whether we'd oblige. So when he sent emails describing in detail how sexy the prostitutes of Bangkok found him, we laughed at our new Lothario who'd never shown any interest in sex, glad that it diverted him from the drugs. And when he later announced he was marrying one and having a baby, we were emailed photos of the lavish party, the new bride, and his baby daughter, Strawberry. It turned out that he wasn't the father after all, that Strawberry was the child of another client, and the marriage was annulled. So him marrying Fern wasn't really a big deal. And him buying her a 4x4 and building her a house didn't seem so surprising after what he'd been through with his first wife.
No, I can't be angry with you. I love you too much. Don't be silly. Yes, of course. Yes, of course, darling. Yeah, me too. I'm going to cry in a minute. Yes, I miss you too. I know, darling, it's terrible, but it's not my fault. There's nothing I can do about it. You know, all I can do is just work and save money and work and save money and try to go. You know. What's my new work? It's sell. It's selling things, not selling my arse though. Not sell arse. What happened? Because company I used to work for, they go bust. They owe me like 1 million baht. They not pay me. You see? From machine, yeah, they not pay me. So that's why I have no money, because they owed me lots and lots of money and they didn't pay. You know? So like, you know, fuck them. Okay, darling, I have to get off the phone because I have to finish cooking. Okay? Alright, now I'll speak to you tomorrow, okay? Alright, take care, darling. Bye-bye, love you. Bye. So bleak.
Having spent £4 million of investors' money, Tom and Tony returned to London, in debt and with no motor.
For the 3 companies spanning 12 years, £3 to £4 million, it's not a terrific amount of money per year to run a company that sometimes had 10 people working for it, you know. So it certainly wasn't, you know, if I was going to go and do a fraud, I'd do one much cleaner and quicker than that, and it wouldn't involve any of my friends or family, you know. The mistake was coming back to England. I mean, coming back to England was certainly the destruction of me, because, you know, England is the place where all our friends are drug users, and I was terrified of coming back. And I came back, and within a short time, everything was falling apart in my life. So I went back to the shareholders, and instead of just letting it crash, I handed the whole thing over to them and to their new management team, which Tom was a key part of.
Tony was nowhere near the con man I'd imagined. He and Tom seemed more like soulmates who'd embarked on a crazy mission together, oblivious of the consequences. But with Tony out of the picture, Tom finally woke up to his responsibilities. He taught himself engineering from scratch and relaunched himself as an inventor, the inventor of the world's most efficient electric motor.
Tom was rather like George Washington. He couldn't tell a lie, could he? I mean, even if the fate of 17,000 children on a sinking boat was in his hands, if only he could tell a lie. I mean, he wouldn't have occurred to him to tell the lie to save the 17,000 children. I mean, he was just completely wedded to the notion of absolute honesty about everything.
He always meant what he said, that you'll get it back, and he would have paid it all back.
He renamed the company and went back to his shareholders for more money so that he could patent his invention and start to build it.
This would explain it. There was a bit of a problem with the sizing, the in-between gaps. Tom felt he needed to finish it. That's why Tom said he himself was just too bloody arrogant. You know, it was his fault. It's all been his fault.
He couldn't believe that he wasn't brilliant enough to invent a motor.
Well, he has invented the motor. It's just that he's
One
not.
that
He's not an engineer.
Well,
He's not an.
he needs to invent one that works.
No, it does work.
Right.
The motor works. It just needs an engineer to fine tune it, which Tom is not and could not. That's the difference. It does work. I mean, you wouldn't have somebody like Gerard so totally behind Tom, a very experienced man backing Tom, if it wasn't Chloe. You really wouldn't. That man is no fool.
And so I set off to Gerard Sewer, Tom's business partner, and the man Sherry said was no fool.
It was very clear that this guy had a real fast brain. You know, he could very quickly grasp concepts. It was a very clever way of converting and generating energy, and at the same time making it much cheaper to manufacture. That is a 6 kilowatt fuel cell, an alkaline fuel cell, and the motor that we were going to use was this one here.
Tom called his invention the brushed brushless motor. It would be cheap to produce and combine the ecological virtues of the electric motor with the durability of a petrol engine. If it worked, it would be truly revolutionary and make his shareholders millions.
So this fuel cell drives a 3.5-ton truck.
So what went wrong?
We're talking about a product. Now, what is a product? This is a product. You know, it has a weight, a size, a shape, a price, a warranty if it goes wrong. And if you start to make a cup, you know, let's stick with the cup.
To cut a long story short, Tom made the most basic of mistakes, rushing ahead with expensive prototypes before the drawings had been examined by qualified engineers.
So, you know, making a round cup is easier than making a cup with an ear on. And so these things have to be thought about at the beginning rather than at the end, because otherwise you're making a prototype, then you have to make another
This
prototype.
cost enormous amounts of his shareholders' money, but Tom was convinced that he could make the motor viable.
He had this terrible compulsion, which we've seen in Tom before with other things, to, so to speak, go on with it until it worked. And it was like watching a man trying to dismantle a mountain with an ice pick. It was a terrible thing to behold. And it made him ill, and it did all sorts of terrible things to him. This ghastly, whizzing round motor that never worked. I hated that motor.
So Tom then wasn't a crook, but just a man like so many, seduced by his own self-belief. That having got this far, he wasn't going to hand over his brilliant idea to a bunch of geeks in a laboratory. A story of hubris, something I'd always feared might be his downfall.
I always felt with you that you thought that you could do anything.
Well, the thing
and
is,
you thought you were superhuman, and don't you think you've just realised that you're just ordinary like the rest of us?
Yes, no, absolutely.
And that maybe don't be so dramatic to kill yourself. Just eat humble pie and deal with it like the rest of us.
I don't know. I think you're probably right. You know, put in those extremely brutally humiliating terms. You know, yes, of course. You know, the problem I think I have with life actually derives from when I was very, very little, where my mum encouraged me quite openly and unambiguously to feel that I was special. And of course every child is special to their mother, but I think that she somewhat over-egged the pudding. And when I think about, you know, how I've gone through life, I have often selectively applied the rules to myself to allow myself to feel that lots of the rules don't apply to me.
How often do you see your mum?
Almost never.
Why?
Because we have a very friendly relationship on the phone. The minute we're actually in the same room together, it all goes wrong.
Why?
I think you'd have to get me on a couch if you wanted me to tell you about my repressed childhood memories, because it's just something. The thing is that, you know, one doesn't remember things because one obviously doesn't want to think about them, you know, and there are enough miserable thoughts swirling around one's head from day to day without digging up more, isn't there?
Well, it might help you,
How would it help me?
because it might resolve some key things and make life much easier to live. The past Tom was reluctant to look at began in this beautiful house in Stockwell, where he and his little brother Patrick were brought up, and where Sue, their mother, still lives on her own.
Anyway, there's a whole lot more of them here if you want them. All these Faye Godwin ones.
Sue and Monty met as book designers at the publishing house Faber, and from the beginning Tom was surrounded by learning, books and high culture.
Yes, he was an astonishing child right from the word go. Absolutely astonishing in the sense of just being with him was exciting. He was asking questions from morning till night, which was great fun. And reading, he read a huge amount. He loved conversations with experts. He loved to know what people did, and then he'd cross-question them very carefully about why they did it and what they did it for.
His cleverness won him a full scholarship to City of London School, but when he was 14, his father left the family home and married someone else. In protest, Tom immediately wrote a letter of resignation to the headmaster.
He left immediately after Monty left, on the basis that if you can't face up to your responsibilities, nor can I, and so I'm going to show you up. And they made it clear that, you know, how much they valued him. They made it clear that he would get an Oxbridge place for classics and probably a scholarship. Who's to say? I think that act, almost of vandalism, ricocheted all through Tom's life, actually.
But instead of giving up on his education, he set himself the next project, to educate himself better than the City of London School could have done. When I met him, he was obsessed with reading trading magazines, the FT and the Economist, and persuading neighbours to let him rebuild their houses or manage their finances. But a few years later, another tragedy befell the family.
I came home from work and found him cold and stiff in his bedroom, which I think was, in retrospect, probably the worst day of my life. Very sad.
What had actually happened?
Well, he'd either intentionally or unintentionally, one will never know, put far too much heroin in the needle and stuck it in his arm.
You don't go to all the trouble of bringing children into the world and looking after them and spending pretty well your whole time doing that in order for children to neglect themselves and not put their health first, which they absolutely should, in my opinion.
And why do you think that happened?
I think we were in a world where parents were beginning to lose sight of what their role is, and I think that's continued ever since. I think it's got worse, really, in many ways. It doesn't mean to say that there aren't millions and millions of wonderful parents out there who know exactly what to do with their children, with their lives, because I think a happy marriage is the cleverest thing human beings can do.
Hello. Hello. Lunch will be served in about 5 minutes. This is Flocky.
Is it nice having your son living here?
Lovely. Lovely. Oh, it's nice having the son living anywhere. Don't tell him I said that, or he'll want God knows what.
Did you only have 2 sons?
Did I only have 2 sons? I'm just trying to think how many I had. Trouble is, when you get old and you start to dement, you have to pause and for long consideration. I think I only had two sons. There was Tom and there was Patrick. I think Patrick is no more. Just sad. He doesn't get spoken about, so I assume I think he wants to feed you.
And you?
Yeah?
Should we go? Do you need a hand?
I suppose you'd better think, why should I need a hand?
I have no idea, because I was being polite and you might need a hand, but maybe your legs aren't wobbly.
Oi! Yes?
Food!
Yes.
After you. Monty?
Yes?
Do you remember Tom when he was a little boy?
If I did, I wouldn't risk embarrassing him by saying so. I think
That's
Tom
that's your
came
next
into
course.
the world fully adult.
Do you think that's true, Tom?
No, because as I'm sure you know, I don't think I'm an adult yet.
Maybe you're living life backwards.
I could never imagine Tom as a child either. From the age of 10, he'd helped his mum with the hot metal printing press that she ran over the wall at the end of the garden. Their conversations were frequently about typefaces and point sizes, and they seemed more like business partners to me than mother and son. But his loyalty soon turned into competitiveness, and aged 25 he set up a rival hot metal press a couple of miles away in the heart of Shoreditch. But with the advent of the Apple Mac, his press soon folded, something he never recovered from. He stepped into an assortment of professions, each one as brilliant but as quickly abandoned as the last. And here we were, over 20 years later, on his way to work as he started yet another, on our first day filming together.
Yes, here we are. This is the fall in bonuses for various parts of the banking sector. And you'll notice that the one with the smallest fall in bonus, where they're only predicting about 15% less money, is the high net worth broker.
Nothing had ever been enough for Tom, and I'd watched him as he scrambled around, trying to work out who and what to be, stuffing his body with whatever he could lay his hands on. Chips, half-pound burgers, whole sides of beef, triple desserts, wine, beer, spirits, cigarettes, steroids, cocaine, ecstasy, crack, heroin.
I mean, I was a proper junkie for some years. Difficult to believe now.
No, I remember very clearly, Tom, I had to take you to hospital on several occasions.
Did you really? You took me to hospital?
Yeah.
On more than one occasion?
Twice.
Twice?
So had he finally found his place to belong with this new wife in Thailand? Did he finally have something to believe in? A simple peasant girl, after all the members' clubs, the speculations and the games with status and money. Was his attempt to reinvent himself as a hedge fund salesman on this cold December morning, a month before he died and where this film began, just another delusion that was bound to fail? Or could it have got him out of the mess he was in and given him the second chance that he wanted so much?
I didn't go out with you then, did I?
No.
Amazing. Have you got any any other photos?
No. That's it. Oh, just don't right, kids. You see, look at my black teeth. I look disgusting. I look so broken. Look how ugly I am compared to the beautiful young man in the pictures.
I know.
Do you not see how broken I am in every way?
But do you really think you are broken?
Yes, I think I'm hideous. I think I'm a monster.
You don't, Tom.
I don't believe anybody would ever sleep with me again.
Well, you're not motivated by sex, so why
I
would
know,
you
that's
mind?
true. But I'm motivated by being desired, like everybody is.
Why do you want to be desired?
Because I want to love everybody. I want everybody to love me. Just like everybody else. There's nothing remotely unusual about wanting to be loved.
Do you think you might die soon?
Yeah, of course I might die soon. So might any of us. You know, I mean, I think, as I was trying to say, I think one of the things which modern society has in the West has the most fucked up relationship with of all is death. I think, you know, we're all in so much enormous denial about it. It's ridiculous. You know? I think almost nobody is ever rational about death. You know? You know, everybody thinks that death is a curable disease.
The last time I was with Tom, we spent the evening at mine with a takeaway, watching Werner Herzog's Fitzgeraldo, a film about some nutjob who hauls a boat over a mountain to get what he wants.
Fitzgeraldo puts in this enormous effort, but, you know, he doesn't actually get what he came for. And I kind of feel that the motive situation is very analogous to Fitzgeraldo. I suppose there was a mad vision in that I foolishly believed that I would be able to improve the world in some little way by giving them a better electric machine. And that may not be the case. It makes me very sad. You know, it really does make me very sad. Because you really don't want to waste the most creative years of your life.
Morning, Tom.
Morning, Flock. Coffee. Oh. Yes. Thank you. Right. So. Particularly in the winter, it's difficult because the sun never comes out. There aren't really any days at this time of year. So you're sort of groping through the semi-darkness, trying to think of a reason to stay alive. I think. But then, you know, realistically, what do I have to complain about? Well, actually, of course, that's the wrong question, because it's not to do with complaining, per se, it's just to do with how one feels about one's relationship to the universe. You know? I think we need some coffee before we continue this conversation.
This was the last time I saw Tom alive, and the lowest I'd ever seen him.
Things had got so jumbled for him, and this sort of slightly obsessive commitment that he'd formulated for his wife Fern, who I've never met, and her constant, what I imagine were her constant demands financially.
I don't think he had a chance in Thailand, really. I think it is a country where faking things is normal, routine.
It's just all part of a con that certain Western men fall into with Thai women. Common sense would suggest to you that if you meet your wife in a certain profession, that she's never really going to change.
2 months after he died, I heard that his wife Fern was back in the sex bars of Bangkok, looking for a new husband. I pulled his phone bills out of the bin and left messages on all the Thai numbers that were listed. No one replied. I'm in a bar named Midnight in Bangkok, the bar where Tom met Fern, and I'm asking the girls whether they recognise her, but none of them do. I'm amazed by how happy and friendly they seem. I can imagine how unintimidating this would be for a lonely foreign man, and I remember a story Tom once told me. How Fern, on his return from a trip to London, was so delighted to see him at this very bar that she'd begged him to spend the night with him for free. The ultimate proof, he told me, that she loved him.
Fun. Fun?
Yeah.
And do you know where she is?
Sorry?
Do you know where she is?
เขาถามหาเพื่อนนี่เพื่อนหนูเองไอ้เฟิร์น
Where is she now?
พัทยา
Pattaya?
Yes.
You know which bar?
I don't know.
And so I'm off to Pattaya, beach resort and sex tourism headquarters of Thailand, where Tom rented an apartment. I trawl the bars looking for her. A naked girl interrupts her floor show to look at the photo. She says Fern was just dancing, but has stepped out with a client. Another comes over. She has a new husband, she says, and is no longer here. Another says she's working in a different bar. Everywhere I go, I see Toms. I couldn't find Fern anywhere and was about to pack up and leave when out of the blue she called. She isn't working in the bars, but is in her village, miles away, in the northeast of Thailand near the Cambodian border. A region that my Lonely Planet guide says isn't worth a visit. After 11 hours on the road, I finally get to a shack where Fern and her family are waiting for me, sheltering from the rain.
How long you know Tommy?
When I was 16 and he was 19 and we lived in the same street. We were neighbours. So I know him since he was 19 years old.
19.
He was very, very thin. Skinny, yeah?
I think I see you, yeah? I think I have, Tommy have your picture.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Very, very old friend. Is this the house that Tommy built?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
Everything finished, yeah? I want to make new floor.
Okay.
I want to make new floor, and I want to put TV here,
Yeah.
sofa here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make sofa here. Over there, we want to make bar beer. Yeah.
What?
Make bar beer.
Barrier. Oh.
Bar beer, want to have whiskey.
Oh, a bar.
Bar. Little bit here. Tommy, you tell me. It's up to you. Tommy said, do you understand? No. so he said, Fun, do you understand? I say, no, I don't understand. But okay, I can stay here, live here with you. I don't want you lonely, sit down alone, cry alone. I don't want you. I scare you, kill yourself like this, you know. And this make he love me, you know. He say, before I love him same brother, I same sister. I not love him same. What's that? Not same. I love him same friend before, understand? But he good heart, you know. He good boy, can take care of me, you know. I think okay. We marry. Don't get a Tommy here.
Fern tells me that when she married Tom, he was heartbroken after his first Thai wife left him.
I've always worried about Tom. I've never had any reason not to, actually. Because I've always longed for him, as parents do, to find an alternative to me who would really look after him, like good marriages are supposed to do. He learnt in his own way how to deal with women, and he was as obviously soft and pliant and generous with them as you could imagine. But he went to the wrong place, didn't he, for that? I think the fact that there are no rules in Thailand was enormously important to him, that he could just go there and please himself and nobody would complain or reproach him or reject him. It's the rejection that's so appalling for Tom. He was rejected twice by Monty, when Patrick was born and when Monty left. And then by you as well, but you know, we'll draw a veil over that.
Tom and I did nearly get married, but then I lost my nerve and married someone else who seemed more reliable. I think I broke his heart, but then I don't think I would have been able to contain my criticisms about his drug taking and his grandiose plans to leave his mark on the world. I would have wanted to change him.
Tommy, he easy, you know. Make food, make anything, you know. I make egg for him every day, you know. Egg, pork, you know. I do like this every day. He make noodle. Yeah, noodle.
If you can find somebody that you can stand to spend long periods of time with without saying a word, then I think you're doing very well. You know, that's kind of the yardstick that I would fundamentally use.
I dream on live with Tommy in my house. I stay here, have baby, have about 4-5 baby daughter.
Oh, you wanted to have babies?
Yeah, I want, you know. Tommy, he say, oh, we have big house, we can, I want have more daughter.
Tom's missing millions obviously aren't here. His house is still unfinished, and Fern's probably going to have to go back to work in the bars to support her family. The next morning, Fern wants to cook a meal for me, but she can't cook, it turns out. Tommy did the cooking, so she gets her cousins to do it. And I laugh. So of all the wives in Thailand, he found the one that couldn't cook. And of all the harangues that came here, she found the one with no cash. I'd come out here to tell her about Tom's debts and ask her where all the money had gone. But I ended up telling her what a wonderful man she had married, how kind, honest and caring he was, and how happy he was that he'd found her in this quiet place, away from it all.
Okay, I go, bye-bye. I want to try, I miss you.
He could think about things in a way that wouldn't necessarily be an obvious way to think about things. I think he would have been in a position where he could have repaid all his debts and lived very well and looked after the people he wanted to look after. By the end of this year, he would have been in that position. So it's a great shame.
In the year 2008, the hedge fund Tom was working for when he died made their investors 49% profit when all the other banks were collapsing. A few months ago, Tom's electric motor was taken up by a Dutch company who were building a new prototype.
Looking at what's just happened recently with the company, it looks like they're going to be very successful, and it looks like our original inventions will actually generate a lot of money for everyone. I've still got some shares left, so has all my family and friends, so, you know, it's very important to me, and as it was for Tom. Next year there could be millions of units being sold, so it could be, you know, it should be a big success after all.
On December the 30th, Tom was in Western Union wiring money to Fern when he collapsed with a bad dose of flu. They called an ambulance, but instead of taking him straight to A&E, Tom persuaded the paramedics to drop him at home, as he had some pressing work he needed to finish. He'd had a brainwave about the hedge fund and couldn't wait to tell his boss, but the document he'd emailed Nick was completely blank, and hours later he'd taken himself to the Royal Free Hospital in Hampstead, and soon after that he'd lost consciousness and died.
Is Patrick underneath?
Yes.
Right. And what's in between them?
About 1.5 foot of soil.
Soil?
Yeah.
Solidly packed?
Yeah.
Right. So how deep would Patrick be in that case?
That's about 7 foot.
Okay.
The problem we have is the water in this area is really bad, and it tends to push coffins one way or the other upwards.
Right.
So his brother's laying at a bit of an angle.
In the end, it was his heart that failed him, a heart that had put up with so much strain over the years.
I would never for a second blame anybody else for the pickle that I may or may not have got myself in.
And, you know, if you're trying to ask me and to uncover, you know, weird and strange facts about my childhood that are going to somehow explain why I'm such a failure, then you're looking in the wrong place. You see, I don't believe... and this,
I know what your beliefs are.
No, but...
I'm just asking about...
No, but it's just you seem to be driving an agenda.
No, I'm not.
About... No, let me finish, please. You seem to be driving an agenda about, you know, something not happening or happening too much in my childhood that made me come out like I am. And it really isn't like that. I think that if anything, you know, what's actually very important for me is that all my mistakes are actually my own. That's all. Alright? Now you bloody well better put that bit in the film, Flo.
What's that?
No, because that's really important to me, okay?
Yeah.
Alright. There is nothing wrong, I don't think, with material progress. There is nothing wrong in principle with capitalism. But, you know, rather like communism being a good idea until you involve human beings, you could also say the same about capitalism. And some of the excesses that we've had in the past 30 years in the name of, you know, market fundamentalist capitalism is just absurd. But the point is, if you think about it, banking is actually an awfully simple business. You take deposits from people.